Hello and welcome to another episode of Crypto My God, in which Graham reports while sick. Now, this week we've got the Bitcoin conference going on. We had the Solana conference last week. It was fantastic. Lots of great takeaways. And of course, the industry's got some good news coming out. Let's get right into it. Now, one thing to keep in mind is this institutionalization, this crazy onslaught of traditional financial capital. It just continues. US spot Bitcoin ETFs at 25 billion weekly volume with 2.75 billion inflows, led by BlackRock's IBIT, holding 3.3% of Bitcoin. One thing we have to be careful with here, 3.3% of Bitcoin, that's a hell of a lot. And it gets scary when these people that are maybe not fully aligned with the philosophy begin to hold a lot of these Bitcoin. Now, this is beginning to spread. We're seeing the model, which has continued to work. It's not an ETF, but this is following the strategy model. I've talked about it. We have the ETFs and we have these reserve companies that are kind of backwardsing themselves into the stock market. And we see today that Joseph Lubin of Consensus, one of the co-founders of Ethereum, has SharpLink Gaming announces $425 million private placement to initiate Ethereum treasury strategy. Strategy being the Michael Saylor ripoff of MicroStrategy. Now, SharpLink is again an example of this play. The initial funders of these products, of these reserve products, they stand to make a lot of money. They're going to come with a basket of assets. They're going to find a company like SharpLink Gaming, NASDAQ, which isn't really doing that great. And they're going to take this huge basket of assets, acquire the gaming company, and use that to get a listing. That means initial operators or initial funders stand to make a lot of money on the price accrual of this. However, anyone that follows suit, when we get a deleveraging event, they're going to get fully fleeced. We've seen this happen with FTX. We've seen this happen time and time again. So it is a bit scary. And of course, today in Vegas at the Bitcoin conference during a Q&A sesh, one of the members of the audience stood up and said, "Hey, Michael Saylor, what do you think about a proof of reserves?" Honestly, a proof of reserves is one of the most obvious things that anyone should have in Bitcoin landscape, in blockchain landscape. Verifiability is the foundation of these assets. And of course, Michael Saylor came out and he said, "I don't really like that idea." He said, "It's a bad idea. It increases the risk of a security breach." But the reality is, at some point, he may have to sell some Bitcoin in order to pay back early shareholder debt. And if you have a proof of reserves, people might begin to see this sell-off and it could cascade and run away. Now, after the IBIT leak or the IBIT exploit, which I covered here, they began to open up and talk about proof of reserves. Exchanges like Kraken have proof of reserves. We want to be able to verify this asset, or otherwise, what the hell is the idea of all of this? So Michael Saylor is now levering up and becoming the biggest purchaser of Bitcoin that the planet's ever seen. And while it's awesome and it's moving our price upward, it is very terrifying. The question is, when does he blow up? And just how deeply does that sink the Bitcoin price? Now, hopefully there's enough different institutional vehicles that when the price goes down enough, it becomes a buy opportunity and we have the capital to catch this. But it's very hard to tell if this is going to be the case. And quite frankly, everything going on with Michael Saylor and strategy should scare the fuck out of you. And the deeper we get into this, the more companies that pop up. I mean, we're just seeing case after case of massive crypto asset accrual by these companies. Of course, it's wonderful on the way up as they accumulate, but what happens when they go the other direction? And this is something that should concern us. It's now happening in Bitcoin, obviously with SharpLink, it's happening in Ethereum, and we also have this happening on Solana. So when will it stop? Who knows? How does it play out? Does it detach from the dollar if we truly get into a dollar crisis, which does seem to be coming? And of course, we have probably imminent money printing, fiat printing coming from the Treasury. Trump is looking to get rid of Powell. He's been unable to deal with the debt. So that would be very good for crypto. But again, what goes up must come down. And it does get kind of fearful. Now, one thing I do want to cover. Coinbase revealed that they were exploited quite significantly. And I talked about how there was a $20 million ransom to keep all this data closed. And they turned around and they said, "Fuck you. We're putting out a $20 million bounty. Any white hats that can get us data to this exploit, to this leak, can receive that 20 mil. It seems really cool. It's kind of like the Easter egg hunt a la Ready Player One. But in reality, this leak is starting to bleed and it's pretty disgusting. Now, KYC, in my opinion, is a truly vile product. This is part of the Bank Secrecy Act, KYC AML, Know Your Client, Anti-Money Laundering. And what it does is it collects people's data into these honeypots that these corporations must maintain as part of corporate policy, as part of compliance. However, as we know, nobody is hack-proof. Everybody gets exploited at some point. And when you create these treasure troves, it is just such a juicy piece of information to get that it's almost impossible to stop exploiters because that incentive is so high. And as we see from Ashen at Kazakhstan here, the Coinbase hack is absolutely insane. If they have KYC for the founders of Solana, they have KYC for every single person who used their platform. And what he's talking about is this right here, that the Migos, that's right, the rappers, their Instagram account was hacked in order to release Raj Gokel, one of the two co-founders of Solana, Raj and Toli, and his KYC information. So here we have photos of Raj with his license, as well as deeper information that they blacked out, thank God, as well as Raj's wife and Raj and his passport. And this is terrifying. Raj, he's a good guy. I've met him many, many times. And there's really no reason for him to go through this, right? He's a founder of Solana, clearly rich, and now his address is out there and all of his identity, and this puts a major risk upon him and his family. And this is something that consistently happens to all KYC accounts. Let's keep in mind Social Security was also exploited. And the more we do it with genetic information like 23andMe, I mean, there's simply no way to keep your data private without the use of things like zero-knowledge technology or blockchains that allow for self-sovereign custody. Of course, those can be exploited too, but they're much more difficult. And it's my opinion that, Meta's out there and they're taking everything and people have a concern. I think basically everything is going to be free unless you're taking these egregious steps to use something like a self-sovereign technology, a blockchain layer, to protect that data. This would be, 2FA, hardware key validators, multi-sig accounts, all that kind of stuff. But this is just coming back to prove how terrible some of these things that Congress forces upon the world, like KYC AML, can be for the populace, for the user base. This is very terrifying. If they got Raj, the head of Solana, this means that all of the users that are on Coinbase are vulnerable for exploit. So as always, this just harkens back to the point. We really do want to push forward for the blockchain use case of splitting people's identity and their identifiers. Of course, KYC is really just trying to say, are you a US citizen? And there should be a way to say yes without having to put up a photo of you alongside your passport. That's just truly crazy because we can see how easy it is from email, from text, etc., to exploit these KYC accounts. With that being said, there's some other fun things on the tech side. We're probably going to get a lot of ridiculous announcements from this Las Vegas Bitcoin thing. It's got a ton of political overlap, and I will keep you in tune, so stay safe out there. Good luck, and I will see you tomorrow.